At this point, we're going to begin exploring the 3D aspects of Archicad, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. And if you've taken the time to really master the 2D elements, as I suggested, you're going to find that this is really quite simple. In this video, we're going to explore the wall tool, which is the basis of every building, series of walls. It's our job to get the walls in the right spot. And let's go ahead and dive right in. So we have this structure here in our toolbar where we have our 3D elements up here at the top, 2D elements in the center section, and then some miscellaneous things down at the bottom. We're going to go ahead and expand the upper section, and you'll notice that the wall tool's right on top where it belongs. There is a shortcut of W, as you can see in this little tooltip. And we have a couple ways to get in here. So if we click this, we've activated the wall tool, and now we have all of these parameters available to us. If we double click this, we get all the parameters that are available to show up for us. And this is every parameter that we have access to for a wall. And you'll notice it can be a little overwhelming. So let's go ahead and, before we start drawing the walls, let's just talk about what each one of these parameters does. So here we have the wall top, and you have some choices to either reference a story or have it just be an explicit value. And for this exercise, before we get into stories deeply, we're just going to do standard non-linked walls, which allows us just to give an explicit wall height and an explicit elevation for the bottom of the wall. We're going to associate this wall to the first floor, which is currently the current floor, and that's going to be at project 0. There's 3 different types of walls, and I have some opinions on this, but let me go ahead and describe it. This is just a wall with a particular width that you type in, and you associate it to a building material. The next type of wall is a composite wall. The composite wall allows you to show the different layers of the wall and its composition. So you might have stucco 2x4 drywall, or this is an interior wall, so it's drywall, stud drywall. And what I do is I have a few that are very standard, and if I need anything different for a particular project, I then create it as needed. I don't like to have 400 different wall types just in case I might use it. Some people like that approach. I like going minimal and adding as needed. And you'll see that that's reflected here. So I have interior walls and exterior walls. I have a little code here, ST for stucco, 4 for nominal 2x4, G for gypboard. And so you can quickly determine what wall type you need. And for this one, we'll just do the stucco 2x4 drywall. The other type is a composite wall, and this allows you to use various shapes that we'll get into in another video. I frankly don't like to use composites for my walls, or complex profiles for my walls. I like to get my basic wall, and then I add to it with additional elements. I find that if I try to put too much in a complex profile, I end up having to have so many special cases that it just becomes too complicated to track. At first, it seems very alluring. I can put the baseboard and the crown molding and everything right into the same section. But you'll find that because there are so many special cases, it kind of starts to fall apart. So I strongly encourage the use of the composite wall. Once you decide on your wall type, you have your wall height, you have your wall elevation, you can have a consistent shaped wall where it's a standard width, and when you use the composite wall, that's kind of the default. you can have the wall vary from one end to the other in thickness, which is shown here. You can't do it for a composite wall, but for a standard wall, you can have a polygonal shape. So sometimes that's used for filling in little odd corners and that sort of thing. Almost always I'm using this choice here. I also have the ability to vary the wall in its vertical dimension. I can have it tapered. I can have the whole wall canted. Don't use it too often, but it's there for you and it works fine. Now down here, this is an important one. So when we have the composites, and we'll get into the composites in detail in another video, but for now, each one of these layers is either a core or a finish, and you need to decide where you want your reference line. I generally go core outside with a 0 offset. I'm not going to get into this too much right now, but this is generally going to be what you're going to want to do. There are going to be times when you need to do something else. I'll cover that in another video that discusses this a little bit further. I don't want to get distracted in that level of detail when we're just trying to start building our first series of walls. Floor plan. This is how the wall will show up in floor plan and section. If you can get this set up right initially, it's going to make things a lot easier. Home story only is going to only show this wall in the story, the plan view of the story that it was drawn. Often this is perfect, but if you do have a wall that's going to span a couple of stories, then there is the option of all relevant stories as well. But home story is often a good choice. Projected with overhead. Here are the different types of ways to display the wall in plan. I'll let this be another video, another detail video that we do later. But the projected with overhead is going to be fine for our purposes here. We'll show the entire element. We're not going to do any override cuts. We're going to have our outline, uncut lines, pretty standard solid line, overhead lines. So this is walls that are over the cut plane of the plan view are going to be dashed, and I'm going to put caps on the end. So these are settings that are really important, and we'll come to another video where this comes into play. You'll find that this strategy is used across all the elements, and once you kind of get the gist of the overall strategy, you'll find this to be a little easier. The model, this allows us to change the surface of the model, override those surfaces. So if we're using a composite, it's going to use the surface associated with each of the building materials that create the composite. If you needed to override, for a paint color or something, you want to put a siding texture or something on, this is where you do it. You just activate the one you want to override. If you have more than one selected, you can make them the same using the link tool. I'm going to keep these as the default now. Zone boundary is something that becomes important for the zones. Just keep it zone boundary selected until further notice. Classifications. For now, I think we just want to make sure that your renovation status, you aren't even actually able to adjust it here. That's another palette that we'll use. It is important, but it's going to need to be a video of its own. And I'm going to put my walls on my house walls layer, and then I'm good to go. So now all of these settings are duplicated here. There are more settings when you open the dialog, but most of the ones that you're going to be using are available to you right here. The only thing that wasn't available in that other section is the geometry method. And you can see that this is just like the line tool. We have a line, we have polyline, we have a rectangle, we have oblique rectangles. We also have the 3 different circle methods. So this is a trapezoidal wall. Pretty easy to use. So let's start. Generally, you're going to be using the chain. I think they call it the chained wall. And this will get you started. So with everything set up properly, it's just click. And just like the line, we can key in the length. And we're building a house. I'll just get some basics section drawn here. Use the shift, close this up. If I click on where I started, it's going to terminate the walls and create the shape. And if I go to 3D, there's my walls. And what's cool is they're the composites. Now, obviously, I use an interior wall for what appears to be exterior walls, but that's really not that big of a deal right this second. I just want to give you the overall idea of how to work with this. So now, just exactly like you were adjusting the lines, if I select chain lines, I get some pet palette choices here. I can curve this. I can add a node. I want to add a node here, maybe at 4 feet. And then I'm able to pick this and extend this out 2 feet. It's just like drawing lines. So we have the overhead of a few more parameters, the wall height, the composite, you know, how it displays in 2D and that sort of thing. But as far as manipulating the geometry, it's exactly like manipulating lines. And that's a wonderful thing. That's why it's so important to master the 2D elements of Archicad, because then the 3D elements are really quite simple. So F3 moves me into 3D. I can also use a lot of the editing tools in 3D, and which is great. I caution you, it's a little harder to get things just exactly right. It's easier to make a mistake. But you know, here's the pet palette. I can move this out 2 feet, hit enter. I want to make this little section larger. I want to get my cursor on the edge tool with the reference line, that blue line, and I can make this 3 feet wider, hit enter. I didn't have this wall selected, so it didn't move with it, but I can use control and it trims right. It cuts that and trims it up, makes it work perfectly. I can use the control for trim. I can use I for intersect. I can use F for fillet or chamfer. All the line tools work. A wall is just a line, and the blue line here is the reference point. Works out really well. Now, the only other complication is, so I'm going to draw some more walls. I used Alt to pick up this. If I want to draw this wall in here, you can see that, so this is an exterior wall. Okay, I did choose an exterior wall. And now I have an exterior wall on the inside, so I'll just change the interior wall to gypsum, stud gypsum, and it heals perfectly. Here's the reference point. When you're first learning, you may want to look at your on-screen options here under View and show the wall and beam reference lines. And you can see how these lines are interacting. You always want these reference lines to touch. If the reference lines touch, the wall heals. When you draw a reference line into the thickness of a wall, it'll automatically extend it and make it go all the way and touch. So reference lines need to come to corners, and then everything will generally heal well. If I want to move this wall, I hit F5. So I click the wall, hit F5, and let's say I want to make this exactly 3 feet. I move my cursor, type 3, enter, and maybe I want this wall to be 7 feet. So notice where my cursor is, it's measuring from there. If I just type 7, it'll make it 7. Hit Alt to select the wall again, make sure I get the same type, and close this up. Now if I use the /, on the fly, I can switch the direction that the wall is going to be on the reference line. And there we go. So I have exactly 7 feet of framing there. And my reference line is along the stud. So if I want to take the finishes off, I can still see everything, and I'm aligning everything to the face of the stud. If I wanted to hit W again, bring this wall through off of here, no problem. And I'll go to view and I'll turn off the reference lines. But that gives you an idea of how this works. My stretch commands are often a good strategy. Now here I got to be careful. This is the marquee with the bold line, which is going to manipulate all the elements through every story. Sometimes that's exactly what you want, but be super careful. If you want to just modify what you see, make sure you go to the thin line, hit F8, and I'll take this down 1.5 foot. Very easy to draw walls. It's very satisfying. Moving back and forth between 2D and 3D is very simple. If you want a couple of tricks for your 3D view, let's go ahead and discuss that. If I use the marquee and I hit Shift F3 in my keyboard shortcuts, it's going to limit my view to what's in the marquee. If it's the bold marquee, it's going to show me every story. In this case, I only have one story, so it won't matter. The other way to do it is I can just select a couple of elements and hit Shift F3. And I'm just going to see those elements that are selected. If I push F3 altogether, it's going to give me the full view again, so I can click back and forth. So that's a really useful tool. And that's as far as I'm going to take this for now. We're going to be talking about walls and many different aspects, but this is a great place to start.